Yeah. Hi, Zeenat. Hi, Ibrahim. How's it going?
Hi, doing good.
Yeah, thank you so
Yes,
much.
same here.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thank you all so much for chatting with me. And I figured, I just, I figured like what y'all are doing is super important in terms of the impact that y'all are making. So just, can you walk, either of y'all, can y'all walk me through what it is that Antarang does? What is it that you do? And, why is it so important to be doing what you do?
Ibrahim, do
Zenat,
you
would
want me to
you?
sort of? Yeah,
Yes.
okay. So I can probably take you through. So Antarang essentially is a 7-year-old organization, and it came into existence with the whole objective of, being able to bridge this employability gap that exists between education and employment that the students want to sort of take in. And the whole organization sort of functions on, it has two major programs that Antarang focuses on. Through two major interventions, it's trying to bridge this gap. And the first one is through Career Aware program that essentially runs in the municipal schools to give access to students to even career awareness and just understanding what are these careers that they can even aspire to get into. And that's for the age group of 14 to 17. And then 17 years and above, there is another program called Career Ready,
Right.
which essentially actually builds in giving them these employability skills through the 2.5 month intervention, which focuses on different aspects of, talking about career, right from career awareness to understanding basic work skills, work ethics. And then towards the end is where my role essentially as a student outcome manager comes in, is once they complete the program, they come into our alumni pool.
Yeah.
And that's where we offer them three different interventions. One is mentoring opportunities, like placements into like first job placements into organized sectors. And the third is just continuous learning opportunities in different careers.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think that's super vital because uh, a lot of people, especially like if you're coming in through the regular 11th, 12th graduate program system, you're very confused. At least I was. I knew that I had no idea what I wanted to do after 12th grade. I had no idea what I wanted to do after 10th grade either. Like there's just so much confusion. And I can imagine like every student actually wanting to do that. I almost think, and I might be elevating it a little bit too much, but it's a little bit of a crisis.
Mm. I think
Yeah.
yeah, I would probably agree because although we don't hear too many people saying it out loud, but I think everyone at that point of time when they're in their 10th grade are faced with this dilemma of what to choose. The three main options that they have. Most of them end up taking what most of their other friends are taking.
Yeah.
uh, and it's only much later when they realize that okay, yeah, maybe I should have done this because that is more aligned to what my interests or what my aptitude is.
Yeah.
So I think it would be fair to say that it is a bit of a crisis.
Yeah, because like everybody that I met and everybody I know has faced this.
Hmm.
It's not just like a certain
Yeah.
group. In fact, a very small percentage of my friends actually knew this is what I am going to do with the rest of my life. Like, this is what I am. But the
Hmm.
rest of them actually, and including myself, had to figure it out. So,
Hmm.
Yeah.
what are some common concerns, or like where do students usually kind of, what are some hurdles that they face?
So, I mean, I think in my conversations with some of the students, I think the very first hurdle I would say, and which I think it was common across even when we were that age group, was just even knowing what really exists beyond the three options of, arts, commerce, science, and really what does even arts, commerce, science in itself mean. I mean, I think in my case, what sort of worked in some direction was I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I did not want to do. So in some way, it just pushed me towards taking up something that I really didn't know whether I want to do that or not. But I definitely was sure that, commerce and science I don't want to do, and the only option I had was like arts at that point.
Yeah.
So that's how I started my career. But I think that's like one major hurdle that I believe that, not knowing what really exists beyond what we keep hearing from either
Yeah.
friends or, what like school or colleges keep telling us.
Yeah, definitely. I know that that's a huge hurdle for me, and even for some of the students that I worked with, they would always say that, like, even they reach out to me today, even to this day. So I taught them when they were in like the 7th and the 8th grade, and now they're somewhere around, I think they're finishing their 12th. They finished their 12th this year. So basically they reach out to me saying, I don't know what to do, I'm stuck. And I'm saying, I don't know how to help you because you don't know what you want and you have no means of finding out what you like. So it's like a catch-22 situation. It's almost like a little bit of a stalemate. Like they're stuck in this place. And what would you say gets people out of that situation?
So I think when we work with the students, besides the lack of knowledge, I think another area which sort of influences the students is just the peers, the other friends that they have around them, and family. That also plays sort of a significant role in what they end up choosing.
Yeah.
That is why we find a lot of students end up going into commerce, which is probably the most popular stream of study, because that's what most of the parents have done, or most of the parents have advised them to get into commerce. I think what we try to do during the program is also just involve the different stakeholders, besides building on their self-awareness through these various things that we do, trying and involving some of these other stakeholders. So we do have sessions where we engage with parents and inform them about what are certain things that their kids are interested in, and maybe we also try and sort of give them a way of how they can start that communication process with the parents.
So
with regards to their education and careers.
So at that point, like, do students know what they want to do, and are you just facilitating a conversation, or are you facilitating discovery on both ends? How's it going there?
So we try to do 2 sessions. Initially we do a session where we are just encouraging them to start communicating, and then at the end of the program, the students have a fair sense of what they want to do, and that is when we try and again encourage them to sort of tell their parents, okay, this is the area that I want to work in, and I won't be able to get where I want to get without your support. And then again we just try to then try and facilitate that conversation.
Nice. Anything to add, Zina?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just going to add a little bit around, because I look at, and I think parent support is really so important sometimes, not only in like discovering yourself, because that's, especially with the audience that we work with, I think there is no conversation around careers that happen at all.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe what they do is they actually even begin to have those conversations, and it's still a long journey that they need to take, because the same lack of awareness exists with the parents as well. So it's not like parents also know what exists, and for them also it's a new area that they are looking at. And that also tends to, like another aspect that you asked, like what is it that will take them out of this turmoil? I think something else that would work out is like some experience that we try to give in, right, through post the program, like something where they know that, okay, is this really for me? Yeah. Even for us, sometimes I think after getting into a particular kind of career and getting some experience, we may have realized that, you know what, this is probably something I want to do for the rest of my life. And I think internships sort of offer that opportunity for them. So I know before deciding like myself for psychology in my TY, I did like a 1 month internship just to get a sense what is it, right? So maybe something like that can be one way in which they can look at how to come out of it, even if they don't know what it means. Yeah.
Is that common though? Like, are internships and things like that common between, like, when you're working with students who are kind of exploring their careers?
it wasn't, I think, when I was doing it, because all my friends were quite surprised, because it was not people that was offered. But nowadays, and I think especially with the whole 8-month COVID period, I think a lot of the students have taken up internships.
Yeah.
We now have like organizations just offering internships like Internshala, right? Like as an example I can give right now. But other than that, also there are various platforms that give out internships.
Yeah, I think with reference to internships, there's also like this associated level of skills that you need to get an internship. You need to be able to communicate professionally, come off as somebody who is hireable, even if it might be as an intern. I mean, there's a lot of competition even amongst interns out there, right? So even just that whole thing, because traditionally it was like, okay, you have your uncle and some uncle refers you to someone else, and then you can say, okay, fine, take an internship in their company if you were so lucky. But sometimes you don't find that opportunity, and then in that case you have to be able to present yourself professionally. And things like one of my students reached out to me and she said, I would like to be a nutritionist and I want to go to this school. I think she's talking about Nirmala Niketan College, yeah. So Nirmala, and she's talking about the home science program there. I have no idea about that program. So I said, why don't you find out? And I said, go ahead and go to LinkedIn. Set yourself up a LinkedIn, find that stuff out. Have you found that students know this stuff? Would you consider it something that, students should know?
So I think at least the students that we have worked with, I find that majority of the students don't know the value of an internship.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really sure what they can get. Also, sometimes what is a little off-putting for them is the stipend that they're going to get. So they sometimes feel like, okay, if I'm going to do a full-time or a part-time job, I should be paid a full-time or part-time salary.
Yeah.
I'm not just going to go in for a stipend. So I think what we try to do is we try to spend the value of an internship, especially the exposure that an internship will give you. It's something that no classroom can, really give to you. So that's what we try to help them with, just understanding what the value of an internship is. I think once they do start, the next step is how can they actually get an internship? What are some ways that, so Antarang of course helps them with internships, but besides that, through the program now we have also introduced them to LinkedIn, some of these other portals which Zeenat mentioned. So we do encourage them to register there.
Mm-hmm.
We also try to take them through how they can actually filter and search for internships which are appropriate.
Right.
So I think that, and then from there on, the idea is that they do keep doing that, and once they start getting an internship, then that's something that they keep on doing.
Yeah, that's. And do you have like success stories? Do you have examples of people who've gone through that system, gotten themselves an internship, and set themselves up?
We do have some students who've done like 2-3 internships, just different ones. That we have students who just keep applying, focus on what the learning is essentially.
Yeah.
And then think of who do understand the value of internship. And I think I would agree with Ibrahim. I think once they do the first internship and get a sense of what it really is like, that's when they realize that, it's probably sometimes beyond just the stipend. But I think the main hurdle is to be able to, for them to sort of agree to understand that why is it important. So that very first step, I think, is something that they need like a push towards.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, if I was in the 12th grade and if I was like, you have to study, and then you have to say, okay, not just studying, but in addition to studying, you're spending 3 to 4 hours, and you're not really earning money, so you don't have any purchasing power that's going to come out of that, but you're just doing that to invest in your future professional self. It's just going to be like, I'm going to think about that and say, you know what, I'm probably going to do something else. This is not something I want to be doing. So it's definitely tough to get a student to see that. but that is definitely important. uh, is there an like, do you go straight, like, is there a process of like exploration that you would recommend through internships, and if so, what does that look like?
So when you say exploration, like, is it just
Okay, so supposing I've gone ahead and done, and yeah, thank you for asking me to follow up. Sometimes I might ask a very broad question. So, so if I'm saying improvement, what I'm saying is, supposing I've gone for an internship and I've had the experience, and I'm not sure if I want to be working there for longer time or not. So how would I, like, what would you recommend comes after that?
so? I mean, I think in terms of it's also about different roles, right? That they would want to explore, and it may sometimes also be like a different role in a different organization. I mean, I would say from that lens, because an internship sometimes would just be a certain role that you're playing, and it also completely depends on the employer of the internship. So I know that when we look at internships, um, and I think the whole change even in the ecosystem, right? Like how does the employer look at an internship? An internship essentially is a way for the student also to have some kind of a learning, which is why I think yesterday I was on a call with a group of students, and that's where like some of them also mentioned fellowships. I think now fellowships and internships, sometimes they are, for students, sometimes it means the same thing, but there is a difference between the two, right? And as per my understanding, I think fellowships is more about, like, as you're learning and working and together. So whatever you're learning, you're actually going out and executing. Whereas in an internship, sometimes it may just be you're given work and you need to do the work, right? So it also depends on how the internship is. But I think as they take up different internships, they realize where their interest lies. So to give you an example, I had a student who's done, say, an internship as like a salesperson in a store, like a store assistant kind of a role. And then she's also, the next thing that she did was like she did like a telecalling role. And then it's about just having conversations around, what really did she like, and hence what's like a next step that she wants to take in. But I still believe there is that one level of conversation that needs to happen even after they do the internship, and some support that they will need to be able to figure where, in which direction they want to still go ahead after getting exposure.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I think at around 22 or so, I was stuck. Like, I didn't know where to go with my career, and I approached one of my mentors, and he actually told me exactly what you're saying right now. He said, do a bunch of small projects, like do something which would take like 3 months of your time at a time, just so that you get unstuck. But because you're in this situation, you're not, like, you're kind of paralyzed, and you think that nothing's going to happen, and then you'll make some desperate decisions, and that's definitely something which is helpful. Do you feel that students nowadays there's a little bit of stigma around certain kinds of majors which may not be well founded?
By majors, you mean some subjects that, or some degrees?
Yeah, like streams and subjects.
So, I think more than education, I feel like students are a little scared about certain professions. So they are a little hesitant to get into professions. And I mean, the problem is that most of the professions that they are hesitant to get into are professions where the jobs are actually available. So, and these are mostly entry level jobs where students are a little hesitant to get into. So maybe I think customer service, sales, these are good examples of jobs which are available, but students are, maybe because of what they've heard from others, or for various reasons, they're a little hesitant to get into that. As far as education, I don't think I've found students who maybe don't want to get into a particular profession just because of the stigma around it. I don't think I've experienced that.
Yeah. I would say like a few years back, maybe, there was this distinction of like BA, like, generally BCom being, at least I've seen that. Like, probably not now. I think like a few years back, like BA, you generally see like girls sort of taking up BA degree, and BCom would be like more like the boys, quite less boys. Like even in my class, I think I just had a class of like 60 people, right, in the BA degree. But I think now probably a little bit more open.
Yeah.
And there's no like particular towards education particularly. Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that, because there was a huge amount of pressure when I was growing up, and I'm so happy to hear. What do you think changed between in the past 10 or 12 years?
I would still say awareness to some extent, like just what a degree can give you after that.
Yeah.
Because I think a few years back, what would be important is when you would go for an interview, like your degree certificates would be like the most important.
Yeah.
I think now when you go for an interview, I think it's beyond just the degree. It's a lot more about how you respond to questions, and the whole 21st century skills that people talk about, like really problem solving, critical thinking. I think the questions are a lot more revolving around how you are thinking, how you are making decisions, and that's what the employers are looking out for.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether that was the case like 10 years back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. So just to give you an example, the batch that I currently did had 4 girls who were into mechanical engineering, civil engineering, and I mean these are generally fields that you wouldn't associate girls to get into,
Yeah.
because it does require some working with machines, maybe working on the field. There is a lot of labor involved where you need to work with a lot of labor. So I mean that was. So there's definitely been a shift, I think, over the last few years. I think what has caused that shift, again, I think there are a number of factors. Again, I think from family support to just the whole ecosystem changing,
Yeah.
Which is facilitating the change, I think.
And do you think that like boys and girls make decisions for their careers increasingly in a similar fashion? Is it different? If so, how is it different?
I think it's definitely it's less of a consideration now than it was before. But I wouldn't say it's not a consideration at all. For certain students, for certain things, it is something that is factored in. But it's definitely moving towards something better. I feel I think that's where it's headed.
Nice. So what are some really like hot professions, like, in terms of like, what are certain professions that you think are in demand?
I mean, considering today's situation, maybe that would differ at the moment. But yeah, I mean, I think with COVID, what's happened outside in the world for all the employers is like, it's almost like they're starting off their businesses again. So I know at the moment, something that's really working is something around social media, graphic designing. I think those are careers that are now picking up because people are wanting to now get back to business.
Yeah.
So we know most of the internship opportunities that we are getting is also all in like the media piece of it. And again, where technology is involved. So whether it's, something around software development, something around graphic designing, so those are pieces that are picking up. Whereas I think in banking and finance, I think like Ibrahim said earlier, again, they are sort of picking everything up again. So that would be around customer service, sales. I think that's what is coming up in those particular areas.
Yeah. I was thinking about it the other day. Actually, I've been thinking about it for a long time. Like that's my profession. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. So I do look at like skill sets that go into professions. And I was reading this book on recommendation of one of my friends called Deep Work. And basically what they were saying was that there's two kinds of skills. There's a generic skill which is not which is easily transferable. Like for example, which may seem like it's a specialized skill, but it's not really. Like answering answering emails, things like that. Those are not specialized tasks. But at the same time, you have certain kinds of specialized skills, which is very hard to find a replacement for in the market. And those kinds of skills are really in demand. Like, these Indeed, LinkedIn, they very regularly post, your top 10 most in demand skills. Like, for example, I saw a Scrum certification was really big, and it's things like that. What would you say are like some of the top, skills in demand for, up and coming students who want to learn more about how they can develop industry relevant skills? I understand that it's relevant to the industry in which they're working, but in general.
So I think what you mentioned about skills. So a lot of the skills that are technical related skills. So these are hard skills that a lot of students have through that's something they get through their formal education. Through the program, what we also try to focus on a little bit is on the softer skills, and these are skills which are sort of more general and can be used in pretty much any industry. And I'm of the view that these are the skills that are actually more important currently, because given the situation, people are losing jobs. They probably have to shift industries. A lot of students have ended up taking jobs in places where they probably don't want to work currently because of the reality of the situation. So I think skills, softer skills like maybe communication, just being flexible, adaptive, being able to work with other people, these are, I think, skills which are more important currently. Of course, the hard skills will come along with their formal education or with the courses that they do. But yeah, so some of these skills which I feel like students should start to develop now through internships or through some of the exposure that they have is just how they can work well in groups, how they can maybe communicate well, how they can be a little more adaptable. Again, technology related skills, I think, is again absolutely essential now if any of them want to get an internship or want to start working.
Yeah,
I think I would agree there, because I think basic technology skills like MS Office, I think, has now become very common. That's like a requirement for any particular aspect. And I think another thing that's again becoming common as a skill is just knowing how to use social media, because I think that's now going beyond just using it for just sales. I think it's just for information and communication as well, which has become a core of a lot of the organizations to increase their brand. So I think that's another piece. But again, that would sort of come under the technical piece depending on what role that they play.
Right.
But aspects around even how they take decisions, I think in the internship period, I think these are all transferable skills, which can sort of be transferred in any profession or any career that they pick up.
Yeah, I think that's super important. Especially if you're talking about, everyone has like Microsoft's skills now. So it's very hard to differentiate yourself based on that. At the same time, the thing with soft skills is it's very easy, at least for me, it's very easy to overestimate my ability in that. Like getting a reality check is hard for me to kind of get when hey, how do you communicate with people? I'm a great communicator, man. I'm amazing. And everyone's like, of course, everyone thinks they're great communicators. How do you begin to actually start the journey of your development on these soft skill pathways?
So I think what you're saying is absolutely correct. When you ask a student what are some of the skills that you have, so the first thing they'll probably say, okay, I'm very good at communication. I think the way we sort of break it down is then we ask them, okay, can you give us some evidence about where have you used these communication skills? Or if they say, okay, I think I work very well with a group of people. So, okay, can you give us some evidence of a situation where you've actually done that? So then I think that gets them thinking, and if they have an example for it, I think, okay, yeah, okay, so at least you've started off, you've built a little bit, and then you build it from there. But in case if they're not able to come up with an example, so then again the question is then, okay, why do you think you're good at this?
Yeah. Right.
So I think that's the way we generally go about it. And then of course during the program there are several activities that are done that help them develop some of these skills. There are certain projects that we do which require them to work in groups. Also there are several situations where they need to present certain things, where they need to speak. So that sort of helps them develop a little bit of how they are communicating their ideas and expressing their opinions.
Yeah. I think the course aspect of it, the fact that it's a course and you're getting feedback on a regular basis on how you're performing is very important. Especially, like, it seems like a lot of what y'all are doing is just asking great questions in a way. Like, you're asking questions where there's space to reflect and for people to think back and say, what is my skill level really on this, and like what can I do to kind of make that a little bit better. What role, I don't know if you all have a program for that, but do you have like a pathway or a way that you all help students identify and reach out to mentors in any way?
So we do have like I think post the program, we do have like mentors that we give them access to. And I think over the years, we've had like different ways in which that happens. So I know this year around, for that matter, we've sort of introduced something called as a one-step mentoring for like college students, where they get access to these mentors from corporate organizations, where they can ask and really learn from there. And I think what works with mentors is we can give you a mentor, and then how you are able to build that rapport and keep and connect with them and really take their help for your journey, I think is almost more dependent on the mentor and the student. So I've known of this one-step mentoring program particularly is like a 2-hour program where they get access to this mentor. And I know of some students who like just interacted with that mentor at that point of time. And then I know some who are, even after several months, are still connected to the mentor and keep going back to them for questions, for other aspects. So I would say even the concept of a mentor, I think I don't know how clear it is with some of the youth now. Right? Who is a mentor? How can they help? What areas can they help you in? I think even that concept of what that mentoring mean, I think is so important.
Super important. And it's weird that there's a group of people out there who are just willing to help you with literally no strings attached. And that's I've had mentors, and they've really helped me ever since I was like a young kid, like 18 years old, like who are apart from, like, who are separate from my family, who I found in different spaces and I reached out to, and they were nice enough to help me. And I realized that mentors, to a very large extent, they kind of, you always have to ask, like, what's in it for the other guy? Why is this person helping me? And I realized, like, once people reach a certain level in their career, they just want to help you. It's very odd how that works. It's like their payoff is their ability to help a youngling out in their career growth. And yeah, it's a fabulous process to be part of. And it's actually quite sad that we don't have we do have mentorship programs like Green Batti, and we have, Green Batti I don't think is no longer working, but there was also like the Lighthouse Project, I think, and a bunch of these other people who do set up people in mentorship roles. But again, I would not consider them to be traditional mentors, because to me, a definition of a mentor is somebody who is at a certain level in the profession that you want to be in. So if you're talking to an accountant, you want to be talking to an older accountant. And it's kind of sad that students don't know how to access that. And also the demographic of students we work with, they don't have many examples of that level of success in their area. And I often wonder what the solution to that is.
I think we do. So as I think Antarang's answer to this is, we do have a mentoring program that we run, where we do sort of, there is a way where we align students with mentors.
Right.
And I mean, I think I absolutely agree with what you're saying, just the importance of a mentor. I think I've experienced it myself. So, but the thing is that I think it has to be student driven. It's not something which can be mentor driven. The student has to ask a lot of the questions. The student has to maybe initially it could be the mentor that is probably taking the lead, but then what you actually get from the mentor would depend a lot on the student, on how the kind of questions that you ask, how often do you get in touch with him, are you proactive in getting in touch with the mentor or not. So yeah, I think, and as far as I think with Antarang, we do have a year-long program that happens where students do get the opportunity to meet their mentors once a month, and I think they are free to carry on the relationship further, if I'm not wrong, Zeenat, maybe.
Correct.
So yeah, absolutely agree. I think that's the idea behind the whole program that has been started. And some of the other organizations, I think, that are also providing mentors, I think some of the ones that you mentioned, it's great that a lot of these industry experts are willing to do that. Maybe I'm not entirely sure why they are doing what they're doing, but it's great to see, because I can see it definitely helping a lot of the students. And it definitely helped me. So, I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said, even, and I think another major objective of, I think, Antarang looking at mentoring was also somewhat like this, right? Like that support is not something where we give them like a 2.5-month program and like magically they will all be ready and set to enter the employment sector, right?
Yeah.
I think it's them having access to somebody who will continue to support them and guide them, I think, through that journey, which is what I think Antarang's response was, that, maybe a mentor can then be somebody who's already working, who's already experienced it, and hence they will be like a good person to sort of support the students after the career ready journey is also over. So it essentially is a part of what Antarang offers. So when we look at career ready, it's essentially not as just a 2.5-month program, but really followed by this 12 months of mentorship.
Yeah, definitely. It has to be like it's always like a very long, like it's a long drawn out process, like working with somebody who knows a little bit more than you. And also, like with reference to what Ibrahim said, I really do agree that it definitely is it's on the onus of the individual. There's no way you can teach for that. You can teach you can give them templates and things like that, what to say, when to say it, but the follow up, the excitement, that's a person to person thing, and actually getting that skill is a big problem. Additionally, I don't know to what extent this has happened. I know that this has happened in certain spaces where selection systems automatically deselect students from certain backgrounds. Right? For example, Teach for India has a selection system, which is they have a group discussion GD phase in their selection system, which talks about leadership, and which is basically the medium of language is English. But if you have a non-English speaking student, which is a lot of students from backgrounds where they don't have somebody who speaks English in their family, they're obviously going to do badly in the group discussion, which means that they are definitely not, like, that group discussion is not going to favor them, right? And also they're not going to be favored by the selection system. Is that the case with a lot of students trying to find a job from backgrounds where, you know, they may not have English speaking people in their family, or they might be of a certain social group which, you know, may not be seen as favorable by employers? And this is a tough question. I mean, but I think it's worth kind of getting into that rabbit hole for a bit.
I think when it comes to English levels, I would say I would agree to that. And I think just recent conversations, because an expectation is the same. And I think when we look at our students as well, I think we do want them to be fairly taken as well by the employers. Like, we don't want them to say that because they come in from a certain background, like, we want that fairness to sort of come in. And I think that's where the English sort of tends to matter, because although we are able to sort of give them the importance of English, I think what they don't get an opportunity for is to be able to practice that English with somebody around them. Since it's a language, it's not something that they can learn. I mean, it's something that they can learn in terms of technicalities, but they can only improve if they continue to either talk or listen or have conversations in English. So when it comes to employment, sometimes that does come in. So, like, one of the reasons why, you know, some of the students are rejected is, you know, either due to communication skills or like lack of English skills as compared to probably the other people who've come in. So that's definitely something that does have an impact, and something that, you know, if there is like another way to be able to deal with that, I think that's an area that needs some kind of an intervention for.
It's definitely a tough one, because it's a weird problem, because I was thinking about this for a long time. I was thinking, you know, you have students from two different groups of students from two different backgrounds. You have one student who's been speaking English all their life, their family speaking English, they've been to an English medium, you know, they've been to a school where actually teachers teach. Teachers don't teach in all schools. Like, if you're in a government school, if you're in a low income private school, you're not going to get an English based education. And what sucks is that we are so married to language, in that we have to have English as a barrier, as a kind of barometer to say, okay, this person is educated up to a certain level. So this completely blows students who don't speak English, who know the grammar, who can understand, and who can even write and communicate well, decently enough. This automatically deselects them. What's also messed up is that is actually how they speak English is also very closely associated to their socio-economic standing in society. So essentially what's happening is that equalization effect over a period of time, where, you know, groups of people do have access to opportunity, and like their ability to get better over time is reduced. So breaking that barrier must be very tough for students.
Yeah, for sure. But, you know, I think the students understand the reality that if they do want to get a job, and especially in the organized sector, English is something that they will have to learn. So at least in my experience, the students that I've interacted with, I've never had a student saying that I don't want to learn English. So the approach is that I want to improve my English because I know I want to work in the organized sector. Is there anything that we can do to improve that? So then I mean, there is a lot of resources that are available right now where students can. Of course, what Zenith said is correct. Practicing is a bit of an issue because you need more people to do that, and they probably don't have enough opportunities to do that. But so the socio-economic status does affect their language, but I don't see them being resentful of that. I see them being open to learning and understanding that is the reality of the market, and that's something that they need to improve and learn.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And what steps?
I mean, given that it is sad, and it's not the way it should supposed to be. It's not how it should be. But uh, I think it's just a reality that the students are dealing with.
Yeah. And how do they how do they work through it? So how do they begin to get those skills if they don't have it? If supposing I'm someone who doesn't have English speaking skills, how can I go about getting them?
So there are a number of courses that students can do. Along with that, there are some online resources that are available. There are several apps that we encourage students to download, and it depends on the level that they are at. So if they have absolutely no, if they're at, let's say, level 0, where they are not able to so in fact, the students that are not able to read or write is at least with the students that we work, it's quite low. So maybe you might have students who generally are able to read but are not very fluent. That's majority of the students that we work with. And I think there are a lot of apps that cater to that particular level. So we encourage them to download those apps. I think besides that, I think Zenith can add, there are several courses that are available for students post the program, which can help them develop some of those skills.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when we look at, I think there are two core skills, like you said earlier, Shivam. I think Microsoft Office. So I think, we call them core skills because irrespective of what job you take or what career you want to put in, I think English and computers are like two skills that we definitely want that each and every student who comes in the fold of Antarang Foundation sort of goes off by having those skills, because they are the basis of what is required in any field.
Yeah.
So we do have like various courses, again, depending on the level where the student is, which we give them access to. So whether it is like an online course, whether it is actually having like a teacher in class who takes them through it, and then, through homework and other aspects, they sort of tend to improve their English. And I believe there are also a lot of opportunities within the 2.5, 3 months of the classroom experience, where although they do get that opportunity to some extent if they are already at a certain level to be able to display it.
Right.
So I think that's also another aspect that comes in.
Yeah. And since we kind of segued back into the whole Microsoft Office thing, nowadays I don't know if I was surprised to learn that over the past 3-4 months when I'm upskilling myself, I realized that there are so many skills which are associated with data and big data, like statistics, regression, data wrangling, coding, using Python to basically assimilate large data sets, machine learning. So many aspects of working with computers that are going to now make every make the previous wave of things, like pivot tables on Microsoft Excel, like things like that, really completely archaic. And it's when that wave comes that we're actually going to find like a lot of problem in terms of skill set. I'm speculating, but then again, but here's the thing: whenever I go to YouTube and like try to look up somebody doing a demonstration, it's always a desi professor who's kind of walking us through this. So I don't know if that level of skill is present or absent in the majority of graduates. What's your pulse?
I think big data, I'm not sure how many of them are, unless they are doing like an IT based course.
Yeah.
Coding, I probably, because now I think everybody, wherever you hear, I think you keep hearing people talk about coding and Android app development and like something related to software. So maybe like because they're hearing about it, they may probably sort of explore it a little bit. But I think with the students that we work with, I think it's still quite like pivot table and Excels are still things that they are exploring.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that's still where they are in terms of what they can do. And I think those are still skills that, employers need to
Yes.
some extent in terms of like starting, like with somebody who's starting
Yeah.
careers. I think those are basic skills that even if they know that, they can at least begin.
Yeah.
But of course, like this, which is where the whole continuous learning comes in, right?
Yeah.
And upskilling, and that applies to all of us, right? In the
Yeah.
jobs that we are in, we need to also be able to upskill ourselves if we want to sustain this particular wherever this career that we are in. So I think that's also an important insight that the students need to have.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, actually, I think that's a very important piece that you don't need to know everything about Excel to start. You need to know a little bit about it and then get a little experience. And then when someone says, okay, you might want to learn this aspect of Excel or this aspect of, Word, then that's when you kind of explore and grow as you work. You're not expected to know the whole Ram Katha of Excel before you start. You have to be able to kind of figure it out as you kind of go, and that's also super important. And
Yeah, I think that's where the soft skills of like not giving up sort of comes in, because if you're given a task at work and you may not know,
yeah,
it's like something as simple as being able to think of, oh, I can just go to Google and YouTube and check how somebody else is doing and apply the same knowledge. And I think that's where those transferable skills then play a role in whatever you do. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I think the optimism aspect of skill development is big, huge now. I was just, I don't know if you guys have come across it, but there's this new show on Netflix called Queen's Gambit. And it's basically about this one lady who's an alcoholic, and at the same time, she turns out to be a chess prodigy and really good at it. But anyway, so I mean, people got excited about it. I was one of those people. I went to the internet. And I used to be into chess a lot. So I went to the internet. I went to YouTube, and I said, I've not played chess properly in like almost a decade and a half. I check it out. I go to YouTube. I say chess openings, and there's literally thousands of videos of grandmasters, not just regular people, but chess grandmasters explaining specific openings via video conference. And all I really needed to do was I just needed to look that up online, just make one YouTube search, and suddenly I'm getting information, all the information that I want about a very specialized skill from possibly the top 1% or top 0.5% of people who know that skill. And that's fascinating. So in that case, it's all you need is really to know how to learn as opposed to actually knowing the specific skill itself.
And I think, at least what I've observed with a lot of our students is that just because of the last 7-8 months, their research abilities and just how they use Google and
Yeah.
the different applications, I think, I mean, that has been fantastic to see. Just
Yeah.
how more comfortable they are to search about topics. And also, I think a lot of the material that is available online is free.
Yeah.
So it's something which is asynchronous, so they can access it at any time. So I think it will be interesting to see how this sort of carries on once things begin to normalize. How this whole experience of these last 7-8 months of just being digitally, intoxicated, how it's actually going to work out. It'll be interesting to see.
That's a great way of putting it, man. We're all digitally intoxicated at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. I think in general, I think you taking up a lot is, I think that there has been like a huge increase, because like they don't have anything to do and they're like, and it's a very good thing, I would say,
Yeah.
because then they could have just been surfing the net for like anything in the world. But we had like a lot of them actually choose to instead look at it as an opportunity to upskill themselves in some way and use this time a lot more productively, which is definitely throwing light on the fact that they are looking at sort of really working towards improving themselves, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. even with reference to the whole, like one of my students, this is mind blowing to me. One of my students learned, I think, just through the internet, how to mix music, how to uh, make his own YouTube videos, create his own logos. He's got his own Instagram. He's really like, I think the whole phase of Indian rappers, Nazy, Divine, all these dudes,
Mm.
they've kind of created like a beacon of growth for some of the students that I work with. So one of my students actually started his own YouTube channel, started his own label, recorded his own songs, wrote his own rap lyrics. They're good. He's getting better. They're good, and it's crazy how that works. Like it's so like just the fact that if I have even the most basic Android phone, and it doesn't need to be like a kick-ass phone, it's just a simple phone with a camera, I can do so much with it. I can communicate with people, I can get the information I want, and that's amazing. Have you found like any barriers to that, like to access?
Yeah, for sure.
Uh,
I think, yeah, sorry, I cut you off, Zenith. You can go ahead.
no, 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 Ibrahim, continue. I
Yeah.
can probably.
Yeah, so I think what I have experienced is that there is a small percentage of students who are probably not being able to access
Yeah,
education. And I think the challenge is that sometimes, everyone in the family also does not have access to a smartphone. So there's probably one or two people in the family who have access to it, and then uh, it's something which is shared amongst the children. And also, they sort of need to ration a little bit as far as data is concerned,
yeah,
uh, because now college is happening online. A lot of the additional sessions are happening online. The Antarang sessions are happening online. So uh, some amount of data rationing, I think, is happening. Access to device is a challenge. Uh, and I mean, I think that's the thing which sort of bothers me the most, because there are a lot of, I think, students who are having this difficulty as far as access. And the thing is that it's very hard to even know,
yeah,
because none of us are actually going out and reaching out to them. It's because we can't. So yeah, I think that's for sure a challenge. But at least for the ones that we are reaching out, we are trying to. I know. I think as far as Antarang, we are trying to uh, provide them with some amount of data, so that at least they're not missing out on our sessions. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I would agree. I think especially with this not having access to even any income, I think in the last few days, for last few months, for some of the families, I think that has been a challenge.
mm-hmm.
But I think other than COVID, I mean, I'm just thinking of just the last few years and some of the students I have seen. Like I know there's this one group of students who were so interested in like editing and video editing and acting. I know I have this group of students from like a previous organization who, like, five of them came in together. They sort of saved money for a period of 2 years. They worked otherwise and they saved, and they sort of took like a laptop and a camera and have created like a YouTube channel where they just put like small 3 minutes videos on what they do. But I think that's a starting point to what they can do.
Yeah,
So I think just the horizon of what they can do if they are like completely focused is really huge.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit of, it's a mix of both, right? Because now everyone has access. I mean, because most have access. I wouldn't say everyone has access. Just I'm moderating myself after what Ibrahim said. I think that makes a lot of sense. Is like now that everyone doesn't, like now that some people have access, like a lot more people have access than they previously did. These spaces are getting hyper competitive. So if you have like a YouTube, yeah, yes, you can put your stuff up on YouTube, but the fact, like the chance that someone's going to see it is infinitely more lower. Which means that you're going to have to learn how to make your content good. You're going to have to learn how to find your niche when it comes to content creation, things like that. So it's a little bit of both, like the fact that a lot of people do have, chance to go ahead, like even what we're doing right now, like podcasting, anybody can technically do it, right? It's not really difficult. It's the quality of content that differentiates you. It's also like the quality of production, things like that. uh, so it's actually a very interesting time. A lot of people have been kind of, it's like basically you've been thrown together, everything has been disrupted, and what changes is obviously, you know it always ends up as a good thing. uh, with reference to some of the older students, because Abraham mentioned that you all work with certain 25-year-olds as well, certain older students as well. What are some, and a lot of the stuff that you mentioned was with reference to transitioning, right? From what I understand. So what are some challenges that people face when they're transitioning, supposing in their mid 20s? Why would someone want to transition at such a young stage in their career in the first place?
So, I think there are two main reasons. Firstly, what happens is that they've got into a career path uh, because of because of certain realities that they had to face. So maybe they've lost someone in the family, or they dropped out of school. So they took the job that was available to them, and now they've reached a stage where they feel like, okay, maybe I want to do something, find an area which maybe I am better at, or maybe I like doing. Uh, and and since we work with communities, so we get in touch with them, and they feel that through the program they will be probably be able to get a job, maybe in the organized sector. Maybe they will help them develop some skills that might make them get into an industry where they actually want to work. So that is one reason. The other reason, I feel like sometimes students, even educated students, they just don't know when they're starting off. I think uh, they feel like, okay, this is the area that I want to work in, but after actually experiencing it after a few years, they feel like, okay, maybe I don't want to work in this area, I want to shift. And then again, they see our program as a way of uh, sort of helping that transition. So yeah, so that is why we find some of these some of the students that join in are maybe 22, 23, 24. And also the support that goes along after the program. So they know that Antarang is going to be there. They will be exposed to some opportunities post the program. So I think generally we do keep in touch with students till I think they are about 27, 28 to about 30, I suppose.
Correct. Yeah. I think everything that we offer sort of is open to them until they are, like, at least for the next 10 years of their life is what we tell them. But yeah, at least
Yeah.
until they are 30 years of age. So anything, whether it's the continuous learning opportunities that they want to come in and contribute to and be a part of, I think all of those spaces are open.
And what is your measure, or the Antarang's measure of success? Like, how do you know you all have been successful in either transitioning someone or helping them find a new career, or helping them find a career without it being new, just a regular career?
I mean, I think I would look at it in two ways. I think one is definitely the, just the number of students who we are able to give this first threshold experience to, in terms of, getting access to some level of experience that really helps them to decide or start this career journey to begin with. Either giving them access to just them earlier not knowing that there are these courses that exist, or the fact that they remain in, a major success is to ensure that the students remain in education, employment, or training, right? Like, they are not students who are not in any of these. So I think that's like one of the major successes that we look at. And I think that goes across right from the time that career aware we begin. Like, the whole objective of career aware is also to be able to show students that they can achieve certain aspirations, and for them to be able to reach there, what is important is that they complete their 10, they complete their 12th, and that's how the NEET numbers are sort of, taking those numbers down. So I think that's one thing. But I think anecdotally, I've also heard from a lot of students that the programs just help them in like non like tangible stuff, like helping them in confidence, helping them to be able to come and speak. I mean, I think all these other critical thinking, decision making kind of skills that exist as well.
Yeah, 100%. No, I get that last point. Yeah.
which are
Go for it, Ibrahim.
which are a little difficult. Sorry, which are little difficult to measure. I mean, I agree with what Zenith is saying. A lot of some of these aspects are a little
Yeah.
difficult to measure. uh, I think uh, education, employment training is definitely something that we try to keep our students engaged in. We also have a baseline and an end line that we do with the students, uh, sort of to capture their journey through the program. But again, a lot of these finer elements are a little difficult to capture, which we get to understand, when they participate in a lot of the alumni events after the program ends. We see them stepping up, and a lot of it, I think, could be a direct result of what happened during the program. But it is a little, I don't know, it's a little it's not tangible enough to capture anywhere, I think.
I get it. No, I definitely get it because I mean, even I've been outside of field trying to get in for a while, and I know that when you're outside of field trying to get in, the the social support factor is huge. Like if you have a group of people who are willing to, coach you and say, these are the skills that you need, or you know what, you tried learning this, you've done a great job. You see from your peers, you say, hey man, uh, what are you working on? I think I'm going to be working on how I communicate or how I present. I'm probably going to be working on interviews or my resume or whatever it may be. That's huge, like learning from one another and getting that level of confidence. Like it's definitely not like, yeah, you can probably capture it in a survey, but that may not be the best way of doing that. Like yeah, yeah,
Especially because the support system is definitely, there is a support system that is built up through the program, and of course the larger alumni uh, whole thing that we have going on. But I think also from the fact that most of the new students that we get are through references of our alumni.
yeah.
So the only reason they're probably asking people to do that is because there's something which is probably, there is a shift in them through the program, and even after that, that is the reason they are probably recommending a lot of their friends and family to join in the program.
Yeah. And do the alumni actually help as like in terms of mentorship capacity, kind of pitch in, drop in, things like that?
Mentorship, I don't think yet, but we do have like alumni who come back and probably talk and share their experiences. Like if they've sort of worked somewhere, they come in and talk about their experiences. Uh, just this journey, because for the newer alumni, it's about them beginning the journey versus for the
Yeah.
older ones who've already begun and are in like already like a certain workspace, like them sharing their journey. So that definitely we do have some of them who come in and share those pieces.
That's amazing.
But
Go for it, Ibrahim.
yeah, but I
Oh,
think,
sorry.
I know,
Zina.
maybe in the future we can get them back in, like, as mentors, probably to come in and really contribute back.
Yeah, definitely. That's 100%. That's always like, that's every educational group's dream, that where people you've graduated actually come in and pitch it in the main program. That's like, people talk about it all the time. This is what we want to achieve. This is what we want to get done. And it's obviously going to be amazing if that actually happened. So 100%. And yeah, it's also interesting to know that you all have such a huge pipeline of students who like who's your oldest alum, like not oldest, I'm saying how long was your when did you graduate your first alumni, Antara?
I think 2012, if I'm not wrong, I think it sort of began.
Wow.
So we do have, yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of batches, I'm guessing, across 8 years. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are. And the program's free, right, for students, or do they need to pay a fee?
No, they don't have to pay the fees. No, there's no fees for them.
And if I am a student, how do I get to enroll with Antarang?
So we have different ways in which I mean, like if it's directly through an alumni referrals, then our alumni sort of let us know, and we have like a community engagement team or a career ready team which then reaches out to them now digitally. But I think pre-COVID, it was like 2, 3 major ways. I think we used to have centers, physical centers within different communities. So we used to have community interns who used to go in and, reach out to students who stay within that area to get, tell them and spread awareness about the work that we do. Another way is already tapping on to like NGOs that exist, right? So we have just so many different NGOs who work on different areas of youth development, really to then work with them pretty closely, because they are already doing like some great work with the youth. And what then Antarang does is like goes and plugs in this employability piece there, and that sort of gives them like this holistic student that you are then together able to create with the other NGOs. So that's another, I think, avenue through different NGOs. And we've also worked with like colleges. So tier 2, tier 3 colleges, where we reach out to students who are currently in their TY, SY, who are looking at, who would look at employment pretty soon. So that those are like the major 3 ways in which we enroll students, and students have access to it.
Anyone can enroll, or is there like a bar, or like is there from, like, if I'm from Delhi, can I enroll? If I'm from a different part of town, or if I'm of a certain, if I go to a certain school, am I not allowed to enroll? Like, is it open for everyone?
I mean, currently, the Career Ready program, which is for the 17 to 25 years of age, I think that's currently run in Mumbai. And because we are like a not-for-profit, and it's, for the students from a certain economic background, I think that's why the colleges that we select are also pretty selective. So, looking at, that's why I said like probably tier 2, tier 3 colleges, looking at scholarship students. I think that's another way we look at people who are already taking a certain scholarship from the college itself. I think that's how we generally tend to look at it. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, and if a student wants to get in touch with you, wants to find you, or wants to ask you more questions about this field, how can we get in touch with you all?
We have our website, so I think that's something else. We are there on Instagram, Facebook. I think that's another way where we are pretty active on those websites. LinkedIn also, we are there. So I think anywhere, I think if they can message us, any of them will like circle back to the team that's required.
Sounds good. Is there anything else that you all would like to add before we kind of stop?
I think I would only say that career, I think just this whole career and looking at careers is like a journey that somebody takes in. And I would say it's not a journey, it's not an answer, one answer that you're looking at. And I mean, it's probably things that you'll keep exploring through life. So just having that, like that sense to your career, I think will just help you to be open to different things that arise, I think, through the journey.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, right, for sure. I would agree.
Go for it, Ibrahim.
Yeah, so I would just agree with what Zenith is saying, and also this one size fits all thing doesn't really work when it comes to education or career. So I think the only way to go about it is just trying and exploring and just getting to know yourself, and then through that getting into a field that you actually like working in.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for taking this time out on a Saturday morning. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to stop recording, but please stay on the call.